What's going on? Boys, arm yourselves. Life stuff. I don't know how we are going to put all this together, but we are going to give it a shot. I think we'll start by talking about you, and then we will get into ugliness. There are some lessons only reality can teach you. You can hear something 100 times, or you can tell someone something 100 times, and nobody is going to get the lesson until reality forces them either to learn the lesson or to hide from it. In either case, the awareness, that individual's awareness of the lesson of the reality, does not come from people, but from reality. It's hard to understand something conceptually without a frame of reference. It's hard to understand something or the practicality of something without experiencing that problem or that need. One of the reasons I recommend interviewing for jobs, even if you aren't going to take them, is job interviews force you to understand yourself in the context of other people. A job interview is like a writing workshop for your identity. You can think you know yourself and think you're valuable in a vacuum, but running multiple job interviews, you realize quickly you aren't who you think you are, and you don't bring to the table what you think you bring to the table. And it's not even necessarily that other people know you better than you do. It's more all the different ways people can perceive you. You're finding patterns in expectations, methods of managing those expectations, and methods of adjusting those expectations. Running multiple job interviews forces you to start reconciling what you think you are, who you think you are, with all the different faces society perceives you to be. It is a method of forced reflection. You need to learn your product. You need to learn yourself. At least enough to sell yourself to a bunch of different sorts of people. And going through these ringers, you find elements of yourself that stick out, especially under pressure. Things that are generally good, and even if they aren't at first perceived as good, you are so confident in their being good, you can spin them. To the point, even if the person still thinks that good element about you is bad, you can know they're bullshitting because you know it's good. You've done this enough times. If there are vulnerabilities that stick out, you can note them and either work on them or develop methods of managing them. Job interviews specifically are good for this because they bring out the worst in people. Your interviewers are in power positions. If there is friendliness, it is on their terms. It is not an equals friendliness. You see this in grant writing interviews too. If you want to get into grant writing, heads up, you have to interview for those. You never get away from needing to appease people in power positions. It's degrading, they aren't going to be friendly. I'm finding grant interviewers are actually less kind, they're actually meaner than job interviewers. It's a skill you need to learn, but if you get used to it, it's also an opportunity to learn some things about yourself, get that life experience, and those skills will surprise you because your life circumstances are like a cloud lingering over you at all times. And if you're watching this channel, that cloud is probably a dark cloud. You're going to spend a lot of your life contending with what your life circumstances think about you, want you to think about yourself, and what you think about yourself. These sorts of interviews and the skills you need to succeed in them are an opportunity to get a parallax view of who you are slash what you are outside your normal life circumstances. Because these people don't know you. And when you hit them with this salable, valuable identity you have chipped away at until you have found what is so good it's undeniably good, not only will you probably sell them, even if you don't, it doesn't matter, because they're stupid not to recognize these good things about yourself because they are just that good, and you know they're that good, you'll surprise yourself. Example, I wrote another letter of recommendation today. One of the teachers who helped me through high school, actually, has been climbing the ladder and has gotten into an administrative role that requires public support and there's voting. I don't understand all the circumstances, but she contacted me and asked me to write a letter of recommendation. Based on my success as an academic and as a member of society as one of her students. And I framed the letter as, this is who I am, these were the initial troubles I had as a student, this is how this teacher helped me through them, not just in this subject, but in an academic path sort of way, in a helping me coordinate with other teachers way. This is what I achieved academically, and this is what I'm achieving now in my career. I graduated magna cum laude, then I graduated with distinction. Now I'm an executive director with a nonprofit. I wouldn't be where I am without this teacher. If you want students who go above and beyond, you need educators who go above and beyond. That's this woman. If you want more of a vote of confidence, feel free to call me. And surprise, they call me. They aren't friendly. Even back then, I was aware there was some kind of administrative drama going on, but once again, there's some lessons you don't learn until you experience them. If you had explained to me everything that was going on back then, one, it wouldn't have made sense, two, I wouldn't have believed you, and three, I would have had some really smart explanation of what was going on that is completely divorced from the reality of the situation. That's one of the reasons I don't like interacting with people younger than, I'd say, 22, or people who clearly don't deal with lots of people on the regular. They don't know what the fuck is going on, but they think they do, and they're going to tell you about it. And they aren't going to learn until they experience it. That's why one of the things I recommend everybody do is deal with people as often as you can, and in as varied situations as you can, so you get a feel for the way people are. And if you don't know the way people are, it's going to shock you. One of the most common ones people seem not to be aware of is people think people won't cut off their noses to spite their faces when large sums of money are involved. They will absolutely do it. In fact, they do it so frequently, it's the exception when they don't cut off their noses to spite their faces. When they don't flush tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars down the drain just to be spiteful. Spite, self-harming spite, is the norm in reality, in the real world, the realm of the real. If I ever magically end up fabulously rich, I'll probably, I would like to continue working some sort of public facing job in some capacity, preferably in high stress circumstances, so I don't forget what people are. Because people are so ridiculous, self destructive, violent, blind, angry. They're so not what you're socialized from birth to believe people are. If you get away from them for 2 days, you start to forget it. And you cannot afford to forget what people are. Regardless, tone of the phone call, not friendly, and I defaulted on an instincts level into job interview not going very well mode. Firm. When you are 15 years old, or were 15 years old, what were specific lessons she taught you in the classroom that were so impactful you still remember them? And fortunately, once again, believing things, there are lessons I still remember that I carry with me that she taught. How those lessons got me where I am. How her eye, as an educator, helped me find what I needed to find. How her care as a mentor got me through. The phone call was brief, but I was a bit shaken afterward. Good and bad. Bad, because that was a lot of intensity, unexpected. Good, because I did it. Good, because I think I defended her in a way that even if someone hated her, they would have a hard time arguing against that. And good because I was able to do that and defend her because I'm better outside my context than I think I am. Or at least I can sell myself that way. Your life circumstances are going to spend a lot of time trying to make you feel like a worthless mess. Unfortunately, probably for good reason. You probably are a worthless mess. Everything in your life, your current context, you are either failing at or not doing as well at as you could be, and probably much worse than other people you can see around you. And you are constantly going to be reminded of that. Life is constantly going to remind you of that. And you're going to spend a lot of time thinking about that and dealing with it internally. But the beautiful thing about human beings, the truly beautiful thing, is you are so much more complex than you can imagine. You can spend your entire life trying to figure yourself out, and you aren't even going to scratch the surface of the complicated being you are. You are a wretch, a mess, and a failure. You are also a king, or a queen, or a king and a queen. We don't discriminate here, unless it's against people we hate. Never get a chance to know what the fuck you are in some factory in Ohio. And note Willard there says what you are and not who you are. That's always a detail I've liked. What you are versus who you are. That's something Saint O'Neill talked about, and of the Vietnam movies, he didn't even like Apocalypse Now very much. I think that is it's a thing worth paying attention to. What you are and who you are. Have you ever considered any real freedoms? Freedom from the opinion of others, even from the opinions of yourself. You contain within you so much more than your day-to-day life circumstances, life context will or wants you to believe, and more than you think you can be. You learn about these aspects in high intensity experience, especially the things you don't understand, don't feel comfortable with, equipped to deal with. That David Bowie interview, what is it, swim out just far enough your feet aren't touching the water, or touching the ground, excuse me, and that's when you do your best work. That's it. And we talk about this all the time, but we keep talking about it because it's always shocking and inspiring and invigorating when it happens. During that phone call, it's like I wasn't speaking. Some other Skimmerlit took the wheel and said everything that needed to be said in the way it needed to be said. There wasn't a way that could have been said better. This self-other crawled up out of the water, out of the foam, and championed a better view of myself. For someone else, on one hand, but also to... It's almost like that didn't even matter. It was like this other me was defending a better idea of myself me can believe in. Weird shit. And we talk about doubt a lot, the importance of doubt, doubting not only what other people say, but also, maybe even especially, probably even especially, what you think about yourself, not getting comfortable believing everything you believe. So when you find these gems that are self-affirming, you can enjoy them and use them the way you need to use them, whatever way that may be. Now, this all shockingly leads us nicely into the ugliness topic. People are squeamish and defensive about their own evil and their own ugliness, moral or physical. They'll do everything in their power not to acknowledge it or to soften it, blaming their wrongdoings on other people or on circumstances, if they acknowledge their wrongdoings as wrongdoings at all, or a fat person calling themselves heavy instead of fat. And what's interesting is it's not even the wrongdoing or the fuck up or the ugliness, it is the perception of the wrongdoing or the mistake or the ugliness. People will be shitty and ugly all day long as they aren't either made to feel shitty and ugly or aren't ever, not like even people making them feel shitty or ugly, but being reminded either that they are shitty and ugly or might be shitty and ugly. People don't want even to entertain the possibility they might be shitty and ugly. However, I'm noticing people have a fixation on the shitty and the ugly. Two primary examples I have been learning about recently: Shin Godzilla and Book Tyrion. Never watched Game of Thrones, never read Game of Thrones, but boy do I like a long video essay. I guarantee you one of the reasons Shin Godzilla is so popular is he is grotesque. As in, you look at some monster movies, some Godzilla movies even, and the monster's threateningness comes from their threateningness. Whereas with Shin Godzilla, I would bet a lot of money, if you could put it into people's words, much of the threateningness, or the felt threateningness, comes from how repulsive this thing is. I guarantee you, for that same reason, if the Titans in Attack on Titan looked normal, the show would not have been half as popular. The fixation comes, I think, from a lizard brain fixation on the grotesque. It's not just occupying a threatening thing role, it's occupying a really fucked up threatening thing role. Book Tyrion, very similar. If someone is pretty or good, all that really means is they are meeting a societal standard or an ideal. Because as uncomfortable as it is, what a people defines as pretty and good changes a lot over time, can be very different even in the same times. Bone Tomahawk is horrifying. I wouldn't define those things as pretty or good, but someone did. And what's important to note about pretty and good is because they are a standard set by a society, they're common, almost democratic. So if someone is pretty and good, they're going to look and act basically the same way. Maybe some minor differences, but it's a standard being met, not deviated from. That's where ugly and evil come in. Being ugly and evil means violating that standard in a way wholly unique to you. There isn't, there are trends toward or in violating that standard, but to be ugly and evil, all you need to be is severely not what people say you should be and look like. I think that's one of the reasons Book Tyrion is so popular, and probably why Game of Thrones in general is so popular. Because you have tons of people doing things you think they shouldn't be doing, or things that are repulsive, and looking ways that are repulsive. I think that's one of the reasons Book Tyrion is so popular, is he's not just morally awful, but also physically grotesque. And that breaking of standards is much of what the book series appears to be about. You aren't what you are supposed to be. What does that mean? What does that look like played out? And what does it look like when people start judging each other for not being what they're supposed to be? People are fixated on that sort of thing. In American television, you have Maury Povich, Dr. Phil, the Hoarder shows, all that sort of shit. And I think one of the reasons people fixate on things they do hate, actions they find deplorable, physical appearances that aren't just not the norm, but probably would make you physically uncomfortable if you were in the presence of it. Freak shows, medieval carnivals, carnivalesque as a trope, is there go I, but for the grace of God. Not only could that be you, but also that probably is you on a level you are hiding from others and maybe from yourself. Probably from yourself. You're probably better at hiding things from yourself than you are from others. Interviews, job interviews, find those things out. And I think one of the biggest concerns about this, deep-seated concerns, is the fact, one, you're probably walking around with something people would hate or find ugly about you, but more that it is totally outside your control. It is totally at the mercy of other people's judgments. Because if you are ugly and evil, it is most likely because you are in violation of a social morality, physicality standard. You have no control over it. People are what you are afraid of. Because you see this in culture now. If you're afraid of seeming evil and ugly, nowadays the move is not to be evil and ugly or try to meet that standard, but to try to force other people not to enforce that standard or to abide by a standard you set. Terror made all the more fierce, knowing on some level that's bullshit. Society decides these standards. You can try to enforce different ones. You can try not to be made to feel the way you are, but you are what you are, and people think what they think no matter what. Talking around all this to get to our point, you are evil and ugly, and that's not a bad thing unless you let it be. I'm finding Hylics form two defensive herds. The first herd is the mainstream. They are the social standard, they enforce the social standard, they seek to be the social standard, and even if they can't get close to it, they are still conforming themselves to that primary standard. We talked about this a while ago, but Faulkner and Sanctuary. Group ritual sacrifice. This is the standard of behavior and beauty we agree to enforce, and every so often, because on some level we are aware we are not that, we are aware we are evil and ugly, we sacrifice someone evil and ugly so we can continue to live this lie. The other thing we talk about a lot is the way moral people often define their morality by how violent they can be against people they deem immoral. By how much they can hate hateful people, for instance. And then you have the secondary herd, because that ritual sacrifice shit is scary. And unfortunately, for a large number of soulless, quotes, people, either they can't meet the standard, or they define themselves in opposition to that standard. They form the second herd. This is counterculture. Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. Counterculture is never counter to culture. It is the mainstream standard repainted for flunkies. In fact, it probably isn't even inferior or inverted. It is most likely just the same thing expressed a different way. It is the same protective herd functionality dealing with the exact same issues. It's not different. It's not a battle, it's a synthesis. Helix, DNA. But they do the same thing. They sacrifice people ritually to protect the aspects of their identity they need to function, to feel safe, and on that practical level. So someone else is getting mauled and not them. This is where the burn the witch shit comes in. If you are actually hideous, not just, oh, my cheekbones are wrong, but you're missing an eye and part of your ear is sticking out like a chewed up dog toy, and one of your eyes is funny, and you can't hear very well and you slobber, or you are attuned enough with something people deem evil, or, in other words, offensive enough to their sensibilities, or, once again, attuned enough to make them question their sensibilities, or to suggest firmly enough their sensibilities might not be sensible, you make yourself a target, or you are just different enough, you aren't mainstream or counterculture, you're doomed. You're ugly, you're evil. You are a real outsider. And real outsiders fascinate me because they're singular. The last time we discussed outsiders, we discussed what we're discussing here, but in a completely different way. We mentioned last time, just because you're an outsider and another person is an outsider doesn't mean you two have anything in common other than you're both being outsiders. Well, the flip side, or the inverted way to look at that, is no two outsiders are exactly alike. Because if you're pretty, you're good, you're whatever, you're meeting the standard, you're going to look very similar. But when you egregiously violate those standards, you're going to be ugly and evil in hyper distinguishing ways. Ugliness or damage is a twofold useful distinguisher. I wrote that in a note. Because one, the damaged person stands out from the crowd, and two, the damaged person is not allowed to integrate with the crowd. It's a double force thing. Because you stand out, you are naturally pushed away, and then you are not allowed in. It would be one thing to be pushed away, but then allowed back in, or to be not allowed in, but never pushed away. This reminds me of in Blood and Wine, I don't remember her name, but the Duchess's sister. Regardless, when you are forced into this situation, it becomes sink or swim. Hylics, soulless herd people, mainstream or counterculture, are going to spend their lives trying to convince themselves and others they are not at all ugly and not at all evil at your expense by sacrificing you. But life, in this instance, has given you an opportunity. You are forced to do something most people are going to spend their entire lives hiding from, terrified of. That being either acknowledging that you are ugly, that you are evil, that you carry these things in you, and figuring out a real solution to them instead of group ritual sacrifice because you don't have that option, or not doing it like everyone else does, except you're the sacrifice. In the South, how many black janitors have been thrown in prison because they're the wrong color, they probably have some sort of mental issues, and people want to hurt someone they think they can hurt? You hear about it all the time, but at my high school, actually there was one. That shit happened while I was there exactly the way I described it. Anyway, your ugliness and your evil are parts of yourself. They are parts of everybody. However, because you have no opportunity to repress them, you have a better chance of harnessing their power. Book Tyrion harnesses his grotesque impishness because people afford him no room to do anything else. Except Penny, I guess, even though I haven't read the books or watched the show, but all the better that he rejects that opportunity. There's no power in debasing yourself only to be sacrificed. And there is power to harness here. Notice these things about the grotesque, the really grotesque. Anytime you see that uncomfortable ass grotesque, there is power with it. The Titans, Shin Godzilla and his mutations, Tyrion and his mind, hoarders and rotten food. On some level, we're aware of this power. And I haven't worked out all of what this power is, but I think at its foundation, it is the power that comes with not playing by the rules and not dying. The thing I love about Shin Godzilla is he defies physics. His existence defies physics. That is another key aspect, I think, of his grotesquerie that makes him terrifying. He's defying reality to exist in that disgusting, horrifying state. Skullface, in addition to having a skull as a face, is clinically dead. He is kept alive only by parasites. And through all his evil, now that I think about it, I would recommend watching Futura Sound's videos on the Ground Zero's Skullface tapes, or just listening to the Ground Zero Skullface tapes yourself. Really awful shit. I think some of the most evil shit done in a Metal Gear game, done by him, done by Skullface, he's the one who kills Zero. He's the one who bests everybody up until Solid, kind of. But what's interesting about Skullface is when you look into him, or when you think about him, he is so evil, but he was, or is, fighting for individuality. It's really uncomfortable. Naked is grotesque, sort of. Venom is... Venom is grotesque in a glitzy way, but, you know, Naked is not really grotesque. We talked last time about if it can get you laid, it's not really a flaw. Venom is glitzy grotesque, not really grotesque, until you get Demon Snake, which he becomes, and it's gross. He's really gross as Demon Snake. Grotesque. The power that comes with grotesquerie. Not playing by society's rules, not playing by reality's rules, and winning anyway. And we talked a while ago about self-love and self-hatred. The way people try to push you into self-love and to eliminate self-hatred, but in reality you want both. Because they're both real, they're both you, they both do serve purposes, effective purposes, practical purposes, and emotional purposes if you let them, if you explore them together that way, not pitted against each other, but in tandem, despite society's squeamishness about this shit. Those two feelings put together get you better practical results, materially, and they help you understand your own depths. They don't deepen you. Remember, you are already deep. Your goal is, in part, figuring out your own depth. How deep it is, where it goes, what it means. Ugliness and evil are the same here, just stated in a clearer way. And this probably has something to do with right-hand path versus left-hand path. I think understanding and accepting your ugliness and your evil, rather than repressing them, pretending they don't exist or trying to destroy them, because you're not going to repress them, they do exist, you aren't going to destroy them, instead accepting them as additional aspects of yourself, distinguishes you more and gives your will more power. Or maybe gives those submerged yous within you more leash to crawl up out of the water and fight for you when the time comes, instead of turning on you and dragging you down and drowning you. If you can figure out how to do this, how to learn and accept yourself on this level, there's a lot of power there for you. Enough power, people are disturbed by it on a level they probably don't realize they're disturbed by it. And to cap all this off, I think if you embrace this and commit to it, you aren't doing this alone, and you aren't even doing this just together in a many yous sort of way. I think you're entering a pact with reality. Reality has given you something, an opportunity, and you have chosen to seize upon it. We mentioned Shin Godzilla breaks reality to exist. Well, I don't think it's an individual breaking reality, or that reality is conforming to this thing. I view it more as a pact. Because something to remember, to stay humble to the right things. You should be confident and arrogant when you can be confident and arrogant, but you should simultaneously be humble to what you should be humbled to, which is reality. Everything you accomplish on this plane, you're accomplishing because reality is allowing you to accomplish it. If reality wanted you not to exist, you could have a heart attack right now. You could get shot in the back of the head right now, and you would stop existing. Everything you do, you're doing because reality is allowing it to happen or wants it to happen, or someone who can bend reality is bending reality to accommodate you. And people love to say they have nothing to lose. You don't you don't understand how much you actually have to lose until you've lost it. Right now, you could lose things you don't know you could lose. And if you're ever in a bad situation, reality might inform you of everything you have to lose. And that's not a fun situation. It's that on that horrible cosmic level, understanding just how powerless you are. However, when you enter this, I don't know what you would call it, self-actualization pact with reality, or are led, maybe engineered to enter one of these pacts with reality, reality starts cooperating with you to make the impossible possible. You can't do the impossible without reality accommodating your doing the impossible, but the impossible can't be done without an instrument willing to do it. I'm losing track, but I think this sort of power is not just power. I think it is coordination with reality. And I think that about covers everything. Long ass video. Repress no part of yourself. Learn as many parts of yourself as you can, and become as great as you can be. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.